Let's give him a round of applause as he takes in the podium.
Thank you so much, Mercy. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
They're not clapping. You need to clap, guys.
I don't think the reactions are enabled. The reactions are not enabled. Oh, unless they unmute their mics. Thank you so much. Asante sana. Thank you very much for all the wonderful things that have been said, and for the introduction and for the prayer. Stellar Generation, you're doing a good job. As you've heard, my name is Ernest. I think the only thing that Mercy did is that she added more years to my marriage. She said I've been married since 2002. And I kept thinking, my goodness, I was a kid in 2002. So I got married in 2012. 2012 is when Waturi and I got married. And so I'm glad to be here with you people. And we're talking about the impact of childhood trauma in relationships and marriage. Now, traditionally, when the whole idea of trauma is addressed, it's often addressed from a psychological point of view. But I want to indulge us from a biblical point of view, because beyond our bodies and our souls, the Bible tells us something. The Bible tells us we are spirits. And you are a spirit man, and you have a soul, and you have a body. You live in a body. And ultimately, the Bible tells us the spirit lives on. Ultimately, the Bible also tells us that life is spiritual. And so we'll want to understand all this, not just from a psychological point, but also from a spiritual standpoint, so that we have a holistic approach to healing. So I'm going to start by talking about the importance of parents. The way God designed our world, he made it in such a way that parents are the entry point into the family. And not only are they the entry point to the family, they are the single building block of any nation. The granular point of any nation is a family. And at the helm of the family is a married couple. And that's why marriage is very important in God's economy. When a marriage thrives, the family thrives. And when the family thrives, what else thrives? The nation thrives. And so if you have a working marriage, you will have a wonderful family. And if you have a wonderful family, you will have a thriving nation. The problem with the nation is often a problem with the family. And the problem with the family is more often than not a problem with the marriage institution. And so God has seen it fit for the helm of the family to be one man and one woman. That is his ideal plan. One biological man, one biological woman. And he says this very clearly in scripture. He says, in the beginning, God created them, male and female. Now, when the marriage is dysfunctional, when the homes where you come from, the people at the helm, the man and the wife are dysfunctional, that dysfunction will pour down into the children. And when it pours down into the children, it will pour down into the nation. And so when a nation is broken, you find that you can trace it back to the family. And I hope we've gotten that clearly. So let's start with the fathers. Who are fathers? A father is a child's first idea of what a man should be. When a child looks at a father, a child gets an idea of masculinity, because father is the first man we interact with. And not only is a father a child's first idea of what a man ought to be, a father is also a child's first idea of what a husband ought to be. We get our ideas of masculinity and also marriage from our fathers. The way we see our dads treat our moms gives us an idea of what we should expect in marriage. Or it sets up some expectation, healthy or not, for marriage. And finally, a father is a child's first idea of what God the Father's character ought to be. Now remember, we said we're addressing this from a spiritual standpoint. In the Christian faith, God represents himself to us through the Trinity. And at the helm of the Trinity, you have God the Father. And what does God the Father say? God the Father addresses us as his children. In fact, even part of the Trinity is that God has a Son, and the Son is Jesus Christ. And then there is God the Holy Spirit. So you can imagine if you come into the Christian faith and you hear that God is our Father, and the only idea that you have of a father, is the one you grew up with, you'll realize that your thoughts about God will be influenced greatly by the fathers that you have. So, think about that. A father is a child's first idea of what a man ought to be. A father is a child's first idea of what a husband ought to be. A father is a child's first idea of what God the Father ought to be. We get those templates from our fathers. Now, what about our mothers? Our mothers also give us a template. When we interact with our mothers, we get our first idea of what a woman ought to be. Mothers shape the idea of femininity. And we look at the lens of femininity primarily through how we saw our mothers being treated and how they acted. And also, a mother is a child's first idea of what a wife ought to be. Your thoughts and ideas concerning women in marriage are drawn heavily from how you see your mother behaving in the marriage that she was in, or how she was treated by her father, or her husband rather. That's your father. And finally, a mother is a child's first idea of what God's tenderness ought to be. Friends, if you look at the scriptures, you'll realize in as much as God represents himself as a father, there are aspects of him that are, if I may use this term loosely, they are almost feminine. And of course, God does not represent himself as a mother. That would be blasphemous to say. But you see some areas in his character, for example, his tenderness, his nurturing ability. And you realize that God himself even affirms in scripture to those who are fatherless, those who are motherless. He says, I am a father to the fatherless. He says, mother and father may forsake me, but the Lord will take me up. Meaning to say that there are aspects of motherhood that God can actually cover when a mother is not there. You know, God gives us that side of him. And the biggest one is the tenderness of God. God is merciful. God is kind. At the heart of the gospel is that God is holy, but man is sinful and man deserves the wrath of God. But what has saved man from being punished and being cast aside and being thrown into the fires of hell? It is the tenderness of God. God has been merciful. He has been kind to us. So again, a mother gives us the template of femininity, of marriage, and of God's tenderness. So friends, I want you to reflect on the relationships that you had with your parents growing up and ask yourself, did you have healthy templates of those areas that I've mentioned? Think about your dad. Did you grow up having a healthy idea of what masculinity, what husbandhood, and what God the Father looks like? Think about your mom. Did you have a healthy idea of what femininity, what being a wife is all about, and what God's tenderness is all about? You need to understand that those templates can either impact you negatively or positively. And today we'll focus a bit on the negative, because we want to process any baggage that we are carrying as a result of those templates that have not been displayed well. So, before we do that, you must ask yourself, what are the roles of both parents therefore, collectively? We've seen what they do as individuals, but collectively, what ought they to do? I'm going to read for you a scripture, one that you know of head. In fact, if I read it, some of you may say, I know that scripture, I've read it before. It's from the book of Mark chapter 1, verse 11. Listen to what the word of God says. The Bible says in Mark chapter 1, verse 11, and the context of this verse is the baptism of Jesus Christ. And in the baptism of Jesus Christ, you see John the Baptist fulfill his role and baptize the Son. And after the baptism, you see the relationship between God the Son and God the Father. Look at this. The Bible says in Mark 1:11, you are my Son, whom I love, with you I am well pleased. You are my Son, whom I love, with you I am well pleased. It is in this first instance, when Jesus is about to start off his ministry, that we understand that Jesus has a relationship with the Father. And we notice that the Father gives the Son three things. What are those three things? Number one, the Father says to the Son, you are my son. Friends, please note that he does not just say you are a son. You are who? You are my son. What is he giving Jesus? He's giving Jesus a sense of acceptance. He's telling Jesus, Jesus, you are mine. I accept you. Wewe ni wangu. And what is he doing? He's filling the first core need that we human beings have. When we come into this world, all of us have got a core need for acceptance. None of us can thrive in life without feeling accepted. None of us can thrive in a world where we are rejected. In fact, the reason rejection hurts so much, when people castigate you, when you belong to a community of people and people ostracize you, the reason it hurts so much is not just because you have been ostracized, but above and beyond that, it's because these people have denied you the core need that your heart looks for, the need for acceptance. And that's why breakups are painful. Breakups are painful because we feel rejected. We wanted to be accepted. Look at the Father speaking to Jesus. He says, you are my son. The second thing the Father gives to Jesus in Mark chapter 1 verse 11, he says, whom I love. I love you, Jesus. I love you. What is he doing? He's giving Jesus an assurance of his second core need, which is affirmation. He affirms Jesus. He sees the value of Jesus and he says, Jesus, I love you. I see your worth. I see your beauty. I see who you are and I love you for it. I affirm you. Friends, apart from acceptance, the second core need we all have as human beings is the need to be affirmed. The need to have our worth recognized. The need to know that we matter. You cannot survive in a relationship where your need for affirmation is denied. And so what is the opposite of being affirmed? The opposite of being affirmed is to be insulted. When you're insulted, someone is basically doing the opposite. They are tearing at your self-worth. They are putting you down. They are revoking your value. We all want to be affirmed. We all need to know we are beautiful. We all need to know we are important. We need to know that God has put that inside of us. And look at the Father giving it to Jesus. He tells him, I love you, affirmation. If someone says to you, you're a dog, now you get upset. And what if you're with your friends when you receive this insult? Someone calls you a dog. And you get upset, and your friends tell you, why are you getting angry? You know you're not a dog. Now, does that take away the pain? Does that take away the pain? Absolutely not. You still feel the pain. And they may ask you, why are you feeling, why are you upset? Why are you getting angry? You know you're not a dog. Of course you know you're not a dog. Of course you know you're not a dog. But what is going on? This person has attacked your core need. Your need to be affirmed. They have gone against your intrinsic worth. You are a human being made in the image of God. So for them to call you a dog is to devalue you. And that's why it hurts. Friends, not only were we made for acceptance, also made for affirmation. Now finally, the third thing that the Father gives the Son, which will now come later and reflect on what our parents ought to give to us in our childhood. The Father tells the Son, with you I am well pleased. Look at what the Father says to the Son. He says, you have made me proud. Jesus, with you I am well pleased. What is the Father giving Jesus? He's giving Jesus the need for appreciation. He appreciates Jesus. He says, Jesus, I see your contribution and I recognize it. Friends, all of us need to be appreciated. All of us have been built in such a way that appreciation fulfills our souls. We need it. We cannot live life without appreciation. The opposite of being appreciated is to be taken for granted. When I meet married couples, they come to see me, and when they come to see me, they tell me, Ernest, my husband does not appreciate me? And I ask the woman, what did he do? Or the husband says, Ernest, my wife does not appreciate me. And I ask him, what did she do? And many times you will hear someone say something like, oh, I do all this for them, and they don't even recognize it. I contribute so much. I take care of them. I do all this. And what is this person saying? They're basically saying, my efforts are not being recognized. I don't feel appreciated. I feel taken for granted. And so, friends, look at those three needs: acceptance, affirmation, appreciation. These three things are given to us from the very beginning as we are made in the image of God. When we come into this world, our core needs are to be accepted, to be affirmed, and to be appreciated. Our greatest nightmares are to be rejected, to be insulted, and to be taken for granted. A relationship where these three needs of acceptance, affirmation, and appreciation is a relationship that thrives. A relationship where rejection, insults, and being taken for granted is the norm is a relationship where you will get trauma. If some of you examine your ex, you'll realize that the reason you left your ex is because perhaps they denied you either one, two, or all three of these core needs. All right? If some of you have got relationships that are difficult with some of your siblings, you'll realize it's because some of these core needs were denied. And beyond all that, look at your family. Look at your parents. The reason many people have got painful relationships with their parents is because the parents did not accept them, the parents did not affirm them, the parents did not appreciate them, or you could say the parents rejected them, insulted them, and took them for granted. And when that happens, we get baggage. We get offended, first of all. And that offense piles up over time. And when it piles up over time, it becomes baggage. Now, we're going to address that kind of baggage. So we look at the different ways in which parents can traumatize children or give them this baggage that brings trouble in their future relationships and marriage. Okay? So again, remember, Jesus receives this ultimate acceptance, affirmation, and appreciation, and we get it from God the Father. So, what are the type of parents that perhaps bring out this side of a child who feels rejected, a child who feels insulted, a child who feels taken for granted? I'm going to give you 6 types of parents, okay? So buckle your seatbelts, 6 types of parents. If you're taking notes, I'm going to go through them one by one, and then we're going to discuss them. So I'm going to list them first. We're going to talk about absent parents, passive parents, abusive parents, controlling parents, parents behaving badly, and neglectful parents, okay? Absent parents, passive parents, abusive parents, controlling parents, parents behaving badly, and neglectful parents. And then we are going to discuss each of them. So even if you've not written all of them, don't worry, I'll go through them one by one. So let's start with number 1, absent parents. An absent parent is a very strong candidate of giving a child the trauma of rejection, insults, and being taken for granted. Because a parent must be present in order for these needs to be met. When children are growing up, do you know how children associate love? Children associate love through time. When you are present with your child feels that you love them. Now, when we grow older, we adults normally say quality time is more important than quantity time. But can I tell you something? In the psychology of a child, quality time is primarily shown through quantity time. You must give time to your child. If a father is absent or if a mother is absent, a child will grow up with what we call in psychology a father wound or a mother wound. So a father wound or a mother wound is a deep need for acceptance, affirmation, and appreciation. And a parent who's absent cannot fill that gap. That hole in the heart of a child remains wide open. And a child can feel rejected because they feel like dad and mom don't have time for me. Dad and mom are not there. And there could be several reasons why a parent is absent. Maybe they are absent because they actively rejected the child. And I want you to reflect on your own parenting or the parenting of your parents rather. Did your father or did your mother reject you? Perhaps it's because Perhaps your mother got pregnant out of wedlock, and your father did not want to take responsibility. So he became truant, and he shucked away from his responsibility and left your mother by yourself. And you grow up feeling rejected. I know of a story of a woman who came to see me, and she told me when she was 5 years old, something happened to her that traumatized her. She said that she had grown up with a single mom, and she had an older brother who was 2 years older than her. So by this time she was 5 and the brother was 7. And one day they went to the market, and they were in the village. So they went to the market, and the mother told them to wait by a certain station and told them, wait here, I am coming. And she went around to do her shopping. So this girl and her brother sat there waiting for the mother. And they waited for 2 hours. And 2 hours later, the mother did not show up. So they began to panic, and they began to walk around, asking around for their mom, looking for their mom. They couldn't find her. And then evening came, and the people in the market were shutting up, going home. And this man in the market noticed that these kids were scared and they were looking confused. So he walked up to them and asked them, what's the problem? And they said they're looking for their mother. He asked them the mother's name. They gave her the mother's name. And they looked around. They couldn't find her. He asked the children, where do you live? The children told the man where they live. And the man said, oh my goodness, that is very far from here. They had actually taken a matatu to this marketplace. And that's when it hit the girl. We came too far to go just to a market. Why did we have to travel this far? And they realized that they were 2 hours away from home. And so now the man said, are you sure you live there? That is the next town. It is very far from here. And the children said yes. So they were taken to the police station. The police tried to investigate and find out the details concerning their mother, but they could only get as much as they could. So what happened is that the police took the children to the next town, and they tried to find where they live. And these children could not locate where they live. So they tried looking around, and they asked the children, do you know anyone else? And these children had grown up not even knowing their neighbors, not knowing many people. They knew a few children here and there. You know, they had gone to school, and school was a bit of a distance, but they couldn't locate the place. So they took it to the police station, rather. And they took it to the police station. The police station put them in a children's home as they waited there as the case was going on. Now, would you believe it? They tried tracing the mother, and they could not find her. And these children did not know that that was the last time they saw their mother. The children were separated. The boy was taken to a boys' children's home, and the girl to a girls' children's home, a Catholic home. And she grew up all her life in this Catholic home, and the moment they were separated, she said that was the last time she saw her brother. And she said, if I met my brother today, I would not recognize him. I don't even know how he looks like. And she grew up, and by the time she's meeting me, she was in her 20s, early 20s. She was about 23. And I asked her, have you ever tried looking for your mother? And she said, yes, I did. And of course, now having some knowledge of where she grew up, trying to trace a few people, trying to follow up with some names, she eventually found out where her mother was. And she went all the way to find her, and she did meet her mother. And when she went to meet her mother, she told the mom, it's me, your daughter. And she tried to tell the mom, what happened? What happened that day traumatized her. The mother said to her, listen, I'm not your mother. You're confusing me for someone else. And she said, no, you're my mother. Look, we even look alike. The mother said, I'm not your mother. So later she found out that the mother did not want her. And the mother had taken her and her brother to the market and abandoned them. And the reason for abandoning them is because she had met a new lover, and this new lover said, I cannot be your boyfriend if you have children. Get rid of those children. And what did she do? She left those children in a marketplace. Friends, this girl grew up feeling rejected. Rejected. And this woman grew up feeling afraid of authority. And we'll soon look at the effects of parental wounds. Let me not get into that. But you could get a father wound. You could get a mother wound. Your trauma could come through an absent parent. A parent who perhaps did not want you. Reflect on your life. Is that the story of your parents? Number 2, a passive parent. Perhaps you have a parent who is not absent, they are present, but they are passive. What does that mean? They do not connect with you emotionally. Do you know, in those three needs that I mentioned, the need for acceptance, affirmation, and appreciation, in doing that, a parent connects with a child emotionally. A child feels secure. Now, when a parent is passive, when a parent does not actively connect with a child emotionally, a child will get a father wound or a mother wound. So, maybe you have a parent who met all your physical needs. They met they paid your school fees. They took you. They gave you food. They gave you shelter. They gave you clothing. But that was it. And maybe the only thing they demanded were good results from school. And you don't have a relationship with them. Let me put it like this. Some of you know that if you are left in your room with your dad for 1 hour, it would be the most awkward thing. Or if you're left in the room with your mom for an hour, it could be the most awkward thing. Some of you have got healthy relationships, so it won't be awkward. Some of you know if you're left with your dad for a whole week, you don't have enough time. I have a friend of mine, he's got a wonderful relationship with his dad. I'm telling you, they talk and talk and talk. They talk every week. They talk even almost every day. They hang out, they do nyama choma, they talk, he discusses. The dad has even disclosed the will to him. They are very close. Now, when I see that kind of relationship, I'm thinking, oh, wow, what a wonderful dad, a very present dad. But there are dads and moms who are present, but they are passive. And having a conversation with them would be a nightmare. You'll get a father wound because of that. So, how actively should parents meet the needs of children? So, let me start perhaps with boys. A boy should hear from his father and his mother, I'm proud of you. Especially from his father. Boys look up to their fathers. Fathers are heroes. A father can do no wrong. And boys need to hear those words, I'm proud of you. Boys need to know that their fathers are proud of them. Boys need to hear that. They need to know that. And you see this in children. When children are small, I don't know if you've been to a church where children at times are just allowed to walk around freely. Let's say like a 2-year-old, huh? And after service, maybe he stands on the altar, and what does he do? He says, Daddy, 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 look, and he jumps, And when he jumps, what does he want the dad to say? He wants the dad to say, hey, I'm proud of you, right? When the father says that, he makes the child feel accepted, feel affirmed, feel appreciated. Now, if he goes up to that stage, and he says, Daddy, Daddy, look, and he jumps, and the father descends upon that child with a slap, a hot slap, woo! That child will grow up fearful of the dad. And that need will not be met. So you see, on the other converse is that if a child asks the dad, Dad, look, and the dad does nothing, the dad is passive. The dad does not even say anything. A child will grow up with a father wound. A girl needs to hear the words, you're beautiful. Women need to know they are lovely. And let me tell you something, women, there's a part of you that craves to know you are an attractive person. And that part was put in you by God. God put it inside of you. To know you're beautiful, to know you're attractive, to know you're amazing. That thing is put inside of you. And who is meant to be the primary person to meet that need? Primarily your fathers and your mothers. And so a father tells a girl, you're beautiful, I love you, you look amazing. When my children were younger, and even right now, I've got 2 daughters and 1 son. I see this in my daughters, that when we're dressing for preparing for church, my wife would dress them up, and when they dressed up, they would come to me and they would twirl around and they would, show me their dresses, and they would tug at me, Daddy, 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 Daddy. And what do they want? They want me to say, oh, wow, you look so pretty, you look so amazing. And when I say that, they feel so good. Now, if they come to me after they've dressed up and I look at them and they're calling out to me, Daddy, 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 and I tell them, tumechelewa, ebu ingeni kwa gari, that child will grow up with a father wound. They want to feel accepted, affirmed, and appreciated. Now, on the other side, if I don't say anything, if I'm quiet, they'll also grow up with a need. All right? And so a passive parent must meet those needs. But if they don't, a child will grow up with a father wound or a mother wound. Okay? If a passive parent may not initiate physical contact, I don't know if some of you, by a show of hands, how many of you, by a show of hands, regularly hug your parents? Let me just see by a show of hands. Regularly show your hand. Okay, aha. Some of you are laughing. Okay, I can see a few hands. All right. Why are you laughing? I can see some of you laughing. The idea of hugging your parents is weird. Do you hug your parents? Is it weird? Is it weird? Oh, wow. I can see a few. I've seen 6 hands so far. 7 hands. So in this call, okay, 7 hands. And I can see somebody saying so weird. Oh, man. Very weird, huh? Now, you see, that is part of parental affection. Kelvin says, mom only. Kelvin, why don't you hug your dad? And I don't know if you've seen this video. There are a few Kenyans who did a video recently where they were told, call your dad and tell your dad, Dad, I love you. I don't know if you saw that experiment. And these men were on camera and they called, hi, Dad. And the dad was like, habari yako. Dad, just wanted to say, I love you. Did you see what the father said? Uko wapi? Umeshikwa na polisi tena? What's wrong? How much money do you want? A parent ought to be active. So you can get a father wound through a passive parent. Number 3, abusive parents. Part of your trauma or part of the damage can come through a parent who's abusive. And abuse can be on several levels. Number 1, it could be physical abuse. Maybe you grew up in a home where dad slapped mom, mom slapped you, you slapped your sister, your sister slapped the cat. It was a slapping competition. It was just physically violent. Everyone was very angry and physically violent. All right? And you find that you grew up in a home where physical abuse was the normal. When dad gets angry, he punches you. Or maybe you grew up with verbal abuse. The abuse could be verbal. Maybe you're called good for nothing, useless. I know of a woman who told me that her father saw her walking with a boy down the road from church, and the father just looked at her, said nothing. When she got home, the father told her, you're a prostitute. What is that? Verbal abuse. Or maybe you grew up and you're told you're good for nothing. You'll never amount to anything. Verbal abuse. Or maybe it was emotional abuse. I'll give you a story of a client who came to see me recently. He told me that he signed up for tennis, and in their school, he was in an international school, and he signed up for tennis. And so he was learning to play tennis. And his father, during one of the sports day competitions, his father came to see him, compete. And as he was playing the game, he was not doing so well. He was trying. And what happened is that the dad was near the bleachers, and the dad was telling him, come on, you can do better than that. You can do better than that. And he was getting anxious, and the dad was shouting at him from the bleachers. And in Kenya, when those things happen, other parents go quiet. Nobody corrected the dad. And the dad was there telling him, come on, shouting at him. And he kept losing. Do you know what the father did? The father stopped cheering for him. The father started cheering for the opponent. The father started cheering for the opponent, saying, yeah, beat this loser. He doesn't know how to play. Beat him. Win him. Can you imagine your own father on prize giving day, or not prize giving day, on sports day, cheering for the person who you're playing against? That man said he was so crushed. He could not believe that his father came all the way only to cheer for his opponent. Emotional abuse. That's emotional abuse. Or maybe it was emotional abuse because you are denied food, you are denied your basic needs, you are told you made your father angry, you made your mother angry, you made your parents angry, go sleep without food. Or perhaps it was sexual abuse. Or maybe the parents were the ones who were, it could be that the parents were actively the ones sexually molesting you. And you find that the parents were pedophiles, they touched you sexually. They did funny things. Maybe you had a stepfather, and stepfathers in Africa are notorious for this, where a stepfather molests the stepchildren. Or perhaps the sexual abuse is not directly from the parents. Maybe it is indirectly. I'll give you an example. This woman came to see me, and she told me that her uncle tricked her and her uncle raped her. And it was a very violent rape. He beat her up and then forcefully and had forced himself on her. And the girl was bleeding. And she ran home because he kicked her out. And she went and told the mom what had happened. Now, this uncle was the brother to the mother. And what did she do? She told her mother what had happened. And what did the mother say? The mother immediately said, it's because you wear those short dresses. That's why you are raped. And the mother dismissed that case. And the girl cried. And the mother told her, don't tell your father. If I hear you told your father, I'll beat you up. And this woman was raped when she was 9. And what happened is that eventually the mother confronted the brother. And the brother called her one day and gave her 100 shillings. Gave the child 100 shillings. And that's how the thing was settled. And they never talked about it. And she says, Ernest, I am now an adult in my 30s. And you know what? My uncle raped me. My dad doesn't know. And my mom covered it up for him. And I was given 100 shillings to keep quiet. 100 shillings. How do you give a child who's not yet 10 100 shillings when they've been raped? So perhaps the parents could be involved. Or maybe the parents are spiritually abusive. There are parents who use the scriptures to abuse their children. So they say something like, you're refusing to do what I'll tell you. I will curse you. You know I'm your parent. The Bible says children must obey their parents. You're not obeying me. And I have the power to curse you. I will curse you. And you hear that the father or the mother is taking the scriptures, and they are twisting them to control and dominate the child. Ask yourself, is that your parent? And finally, financial abuse. We know in Africa we've got black tax. Black tax. And some of you who are firstborns maybe identify with this. Maybe you grew up in a poor home, and you struggled to go through school. Your parents took you through school, and once they educated you, they stopped. And maybe you had 4 other siblings after you. And what happens is that you are forced to educate all those siblings. And you cannot educate them all. Why? Because you find that it's a burden on you. But your parents force you to educate them. And your siblings get to succeed, they graduate, they start careers, some of them even get married before you, and you have loans to pay, and your siblings don't even recognize the pain that you have borne. And your parents have never let you go. Every month they call you for money. And if you don't send them money, they get angry with you. I'm not saying it's bad to support our parents, it's good, but you must notice when abuse is happening. They get angry with you. They threaten you. They call you names. They insult you. You know, you get your first salary and they tell you, listen, you must tell us how much you earn. And you're forced to say how much you earn. And after you're forced to say how much you earn, you are told from now on, half your salary will be coming here. And if you don't, you get out. And your parents threaten to disassociate with you because you refuse to give them money. Financial abuse. Father and mother, when father and mother do this, this will bring the trauma that brings baggage. Number 4. We're almost done with the list of parents. Controlling parents. Maybe you have a parent who does not give you freedom. Wherever you go, your parent is like a helicopter hovering over you. Your parent is like a shadow. So I know of a young man who came to see me. He completed his high school when he was 18. And he was going to church for the ex-cons program. And the father says, no. Where are you going? It's dangerous. You could get hurt. You could get knocked by a car. You could get kidnapped. Especially right now in this government, right? You could get kidnapped. And you know what happened? The father says, hey, stay at home. You're not going anywhere. And the guy could not participate in the ex-cons. So throughout his post-high school life, he was very much at home, never allowed to interact with anyone. And then he went to the university. He noticed some of his university friends were getting to like one another, getting to relationships. He attempted to date a girl. His father said, don't waste your time with relationships. And of course, the father had a point, but he did not know. He later found out that the father did not want any person next to him. And the father said, no girlfriends. And even after school, the guy tried to hang out with the friends. He was told, you come back home immediately. And the guy had no social life, controlled. And the father would regulate the amount of money he had. He wanted to go somewhere for an event. The father would say, I will drop you. He said, I can go by myself. No. I will go myself. I'll drop you myself. And it was traumatizing. And after that, He grew up, he started at working. When he got a job, the father said, which job is that you've gotten? No. That job will not pay you well. Come work for my company. I'll pay you. He started working for the dad's company. He was not paid. And he had arrears of about 8 months not being paid. And afterwards, his dad just kept him at home, told him, you're here at home, you are eating my food, there's no need for paying you, you're benefiting. The guy did not grow in his career. By the time he got to the age of 28, the man realized most of his friends are getting married, and he has no relationship with them. He reaches out to them, they have no connection with him. And he's feeling very bitter. He's like, I have no friends. Why? He's been locked in his house. And he's trying to wonder what's going on. His father controlled him. And he was very bitter with his dad. And the way out of this is that he had to run away from home. Literally, imagine a 28-year-old man had to run away from home. And I remember now he started now dating at the age of 28. And he said, Ernest, I was so awkward. I didn't even know how to talk to a girl. I didn't even know, how to go on a date with a girl. When I went for a date with a girl, I didn't know do I pay for the date? His father never taught him anything. Controlling parents. And this control goes on even into marriage. The mother or the father controls how you act in that marriage. The mother checks on you. And this controlling parent can go on. Okay? Yeah, they're people beyond 28. Yeah, it's true. And I know there are people beyond 28 who have not started dating. And I'm not saying that all people beyond 28 who have not started dating is because of that, but I'm saying that could be one of the reasons. Okay? One of the reasons. So by the time you're 28, arguably, your parents should encourage you to attempt some things, all right? But some parents control you. Number 5, misbehaving parents. Number 5, misbehaving parents. Perhaps you have a parent who is embarrassing. Maybe you had prize giving day and your father or your mother showed up drunk. And your father fell in the flower bed. And all the children laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And they said, ona baba nani ameanguka kwa flower bed. And they laughed and laughed. And you were so embarrassed because that was your father. And everyone kept saying, that's your father. But you denied your father. You denied him 3 times like Jesus denied Jesus. Like Peter denied Jesus. You said, no, I do not know him. I do not know him. I do not know him. And let me tell you, a cock did not need to crow. You knew you had denied him. And you do not want to be associated with him because you just go like, yeah, that can't be my dad. Embarrassing. Maybe it was your mother. Maybe your mother was caught sleeping with another man's husband, another woman's husband. And it was a scandal. And in the neighborhood, you saw 2 women fighting in the parking lot, fighting one another. And someone was recording, on our mama kipigana. And you're trying to say, hey, don't record, that's my mom. And you know that video will be uploaded on Twitter. And then now you'll be trending. And they'll be like, look at these women. And then people are asking you, see, that is your estate. That looks like your mother. Embarrassing parents. Or maybe your father or your mother was involved in corruption. And they were seen on TV, yeah? And they appeared hiding their faces. Because it was said, theft in such and such company, and their names were flashing on the screen. That can give you a father wound or a mother wound. Now, finally, number 6, neglectful parents. So, there's a term in psychology called parentification. What is parentification? Parentification is when a child takes up the role of a parent because a parent is neglectful. So, maybe you grew up. Someone says, it seems you're losing the speaker. Can you hear me? Am I clear? Am I clear? Someone says they're losing me?
Yes, you're clear.
All right, I'm clear.
Yes,
good.
you are.
Okay, good. So I think the person who says I'm not clear, maybe just check your connection. All right. So the final parent is there, neglectful parent. So in parentification is when a child takes up the role of a parent because a parent is neglectful. So you find that parents neglect their marriages and they use children as the counselors. So you find that the mother tells the child, go tell your father, I am not cooking today. And the child goes and tells the father, Mom has said they are not cooking today. And then the father says, you go tell your mother I don't want to eat her food. And you find that now the child is in between and they're trying to pacify the parents. The father comes home drunk. It is the child who receives the drunk. The father cleans up the father, puts him in bed, serves the father food, The mother is no longer responsible. You have to even maybe do your homework. After you do your homework, you help your siblings do their homework. After you help them, you have to wash the dishes. After wash the dishes, wake up in the morning, wash your clothes. After you wash your clothes, take your siblings to school. You even sign on the book for them. The child becomes a parent. Parentification. That can give you a father wound. And you find that there are children who have grown up without a childhood. You find that they are unable to remember a time when they could play. Children are meant to play. But when you think of your childhood, you just realize you have been a parent all your life, mediating. And such children, they are often, many times, they are normally the firstborn children, or if they're not the firstborn children, they are the most financially successful children. You find that even in a family meeting, it is that child who chairs the meeting, not the parents. And you find when things need to run, it is that child who is called to run everything. And you find that even the other siblings look at that child as the firstborn, as the parent. That child is not the firstborn, that child is the parent. You find that that child was even disciplining the other children. The other children were misbehaving, and you find that they were beaten. You find that you were beaten by your elder brother because your elder brother was like your father. Why? Your elder brother was forced to take a role of a parent. Friends, neglectful parents. I want you to ask yourself, do you see your parents in any of these 6? Is your parent an absent parent, a passive parent, an abusive parent, a controlling parent, a misbehaving parent, or a neglectful parent? Are there any of those parents? Friends, if you have those kinds of parents, friends, if you don't process that pain, it will affect you in the future. How will it affect you? It will affect you in 5 ways. It will affect you in 5 ways. And let me give you the 5 ways by starting to share my story. So, I grew up in a home where my parents were very loving. They did their absolute best. I applaud them. I thank them. Even right now, I've got a good relationship with both of them. But it was not always like that with my father. My father was a passive parent. He's a wonderful man. He paid our school fees, took us to good schools. He ensured we had all that we needed. My father never abused us, but he was a passive parent. And my wound came from the passive parent. And perhaps your wound may come from any other parent. I'm just giving you my story. Okay? So your story doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but I want to show you the impact of all these 6 types of parents. Okay? And so my father, I remember in class 7, the moment my father wounds began is when I scored 97% in a math paper. I was so excited. I ran home and I wanted to show my dad. I just wanted my dad to say to me, "You are my son whom I love. With you I am well pleased." Remember the 3 needs? Acceptance, affirmation, and appreciation. I was craving for that. And the things that children crave for those needs, even when they don't know what those needs are. We cannot articulate them, but we crave them. And so I ran home, and what happened? I just found my dad about to leave the house. He was on the veranda, and I gave him the paper. I said, Daddy, look, I got 97%. My dad took the paper, he lowered his glasses, and he began to go through the paper, saying nothing. And then he looked at number 16 and said, you failed number 16. This was a very easy question. Why did you fail it? And my father told me, Ernest, you need to pull up your socks. And I couldn't believe it. I said, Daddy, I got 97%. And he told me, but who was the highest? Oh, man, I was feeling crushed. I said, well, June was the highest. What did June get? June got 100%. He said, 100%? He told me, he handed my paper back to me and told me, you still have a long way to go. And he left me on that veranda with that 97%. Friends, I felt like a failure. I hated that grade. I have never hated passing an exam like I did that moment. And I kept thinking, what gives? And so what did I do? I said, I need to please my dad. I began to try to pass exams. And that was the final exam in class 7. That whole holiday in class 7, the long holiday, I spent it reading and studying. I read books. In fact, I remember even when I was not reading academically, I would just read books, novels. I remember I completed 7 novels in about 2 weeks. I read the Chronicles of Narnia. All 7 of them, I read them in about 2 weeks. And I just wanted to read. And when class 8 came, I said, I'm going to beat June. I'm going to win June. Then my dad will see that I can also be the best. And so when the first exam came for class 8, I was number 3. And I had never been number 3. I was always number 6, number 7, number 8. 6, 7, 8. And I was number 3. And I was so happy. I was like, oh my goodness, this is the best. But you know what? When my dad heard that I was number 3, he didn't say anything. He didn't say good job. He didn't say you've done very well. He didn't say this is the best you performed. He was quiet. And I was angry. Why didn't he say anything? And you know what? June had still beat me. June was number 1. Friends, let me tell you something. No matter how much I tried to read, I couldn't beat June. June was just the best student. June even went to Alliance. What to Alliance? Bwana sifiwe. You know? And let me tell you, I realized much later that in life there are people who are better than you. In life, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. There are people who will be better than you academically. There are people who will be better than you in all ways. Someone says they're June Agai. No, it was not June Agai. It was another June. It was June Lukuyu. In life, people will just be better than you. Yeah? Tusamehe June. Oh, man. What is it? And Hannes, what's the difference between the neglectful parent and the passive parent? So the neglectful parent lets the child take up their responsibilities. The passive parent will not give up their responsibilities to the child. That's the difference. Huh? So what happened? I went to high school. And when I went to high school, I was so glad. Woo, now there's no more June. I did not know that June was a template. When I went to high school, I found that there were 50 other Junes. They just had male names. And friends, I remember I did the first exam, and I remember I think I was number 47. And when we had the open day, my father came, and when he saw my performance, he told me, you are number 47. This is the worst performance you've ever had. How could you be number 47? And it came to that, Dad, we are 200 students. I really tried. He said, you are dropping. How can you be number 47? This is the worst performance. And friends, I was getting crushed. I remember during my physics teacher, and it didn't help that my physics teacher also ended up wounding me, because I remember I was not very good in physics. And I remember one time, my physics teacher, when he saw my failure, he told me, I got 20% in a certain exam, and I had encouraged myself, because when I got 20%, I don't know if you had this scenario in school where you are called, you're given your paper, and you look at the paper, it is 20%. And then when you're going down to sit, you feel bad. And then you look at your neighbor's paper, you see they've gotten 13%. And then you tell yourself, oh, thank God. Woo, thank God, I thought I had failed. So it was that kind of scenario. I had failed, I got 20%. And I remember my physics teacher was so angry with me. My physics teacher said to me, and he had a very heavy Kamba accent, He said, Kinjana, how can you get a pound? How can you get a pound? Sasa muzazi ameuza ngombe kusomeshe ingine. And he called me a cow. And I remember now when this teacher met with my dad, it was now double trouble. The teacher who called me a cow is now there with my father. And my father is saying, yes, you're not passing. You're a failure. You're not passing. And let me tell you guys, it hurt me. What did I do? I became angry. I became bitter. And this is the first effect. This is the first impact of childhood trauma in relationships. Number one, it makes you bitter. It makes you bitter and angry. You grow up with a bitter heart. You grow up with deep resentment inside of you, bitterness. And where the bitterness comes? Because your core needs have not been met. And so as a result, you rebel. And bitterness is the first thing. Number two, I began to hate my father out of that bitterness. So let me just stick on the bitterness before we go to number two. I began to hate my father. I began to see all the mistakes he made. I began to see all the things he had done, and I just hated him. When I got to university, friends, I hated him so much, I dropped his name. Can you believe it? I dropped his name, and I said, don't call me by that name. I had a very dry relationship with my dad, transactional. And I was so glad when I got the chance to move out into campus, to go to the hostels, I moved out into campus. And you know what? I looked for a job. When I got a job, In fact, I started taking care of myself financially because I didn't want to depend on my parents. And at that same time, I was going through a tough time with my mom because of finances. I noticed that my mom would hold back some finances. In fact, when she found out I have a job, she held back. So I hated my parents. And what did I do? Guys, impact number 2. I started looking for these needs to be met outside the home. And this is what happens. When the core needs are not met by parents, you start looking for those needs to be met outside the home. And I'll give you examples. If a girl is not told you're beautiful, you're loved, what will happen? You will start looking for someone to tell you you're beautiful and you're loved. And you'll notice, if you're if you're in high school, ladies, I don't know if you identify with this. When you go for a funky in high school, and a boy tells you, hey, when him super, msawa, beautiful, fine girl, no pimple, and he praises your beauty, oh my goodness, you melt. And you wonder, why are you melting? And you go home and you go back to school and you're wondering, why is it that I can't stop seeing this boy in my porridge? Wherever he's in my tea, he's in my porridge, he's everywhere. Why? Because this boy has given you a need that you so desperately want. This boy has he's driving you crazy. You're thinking, what? Why? This boy has told you things you ought to have heard from your kid. Your parents ought to have told you you're loved, you're beautiful. But now you're hearing for the first time when you're 16. And then you are desperate for it. So what do? You give him your number. You meet over the holidays. The boy says, msupa, niaje. And you want to hear that over and over again. And maybe the boy says, you know what? Why don't you kiss me? Kiss me. And because you want to hear the words again, you compromise sexually, you kiss him. And it starts with a kiss, and then it graduates to making out, and from making out, it graduates, and the boy says, sleep with me. And you find that many teenagers experiment sexually, many teenage girls, they sleep with men, not because they want to have sex, but because they are longing for love. And you find that you've got teenage pregnancies. Let me tell you, a teenage pregnancy crisis is not a teenage crisis, it is a parenting crisis. Those teenagers are looking for someone to love them. They are looking for someone to accept them. And because they are afraid of more rejection by their parents, what do? They abort those children. And so now you have got double trauma. Double trauma. And so you find that this hurts you badly. And so you look for those needs outside the home. If you're a boy, you find that you've not been affirmed, your parents have not told you they're proud of you. So you meet a group of friends and they are smoking weed. And they tell you, futa ifegi, futa. And you try and smoke it. And when you smoke it, your friends tell you, we are proud of you. But then when you grow up, you realize all the people who are proud of you, all the people who say they are proud of you boys, you realize all those boys are fools. They are all fools. But you find that you cannot break rank with them. You don't want to leave them. Why don't you want to leave them? Because they are the people who have met your needs. And you find a lady, by the time someone says they love you, you realize they just want to use you. They love you the way a hyena loves a sheep. And what happens? One of the ways in which people start looking for these needs outside the home is through serial dating. So you find that someone is constantly dating. They hate being single. They hate being alone. Why? Because they feel like if they're alone, they can't be accepted, affirmed, and appreciated. So they're constantly looking for a relationship. And so you find that they're constantly dating. And these relationships end. And by the time you find this person is 25, they have been in 8 relationships. 8 relationships. And in these 8 relationships, they have slept with some of them. They have kissed a few frogs. They have done this. They have done that. And so they get bitter. And then they start saying things like, all men are dogs. All men are trash. Or you find them saying, all women are frogs. Men are dogs, women are frogs. And you're bitter. And what do you start doing? You start looking for people to strengthen your bitterness and your pain. And so you find as a man, you maybe start gravitating to men who've got a form of toxic masculinity. You start gravitating to people like Andrew Tate or Andrew Kibe. Or you find as a woman, you start looking for toxic femininity, to affirm that men are dogs. Now what happens? I remember a girl who came and told me, Ernest, all men are dogs. Woo! I said, how much? Which ones? They said, all the ones I've dated are dogs. 6 of them, 6 dogs. And I said, wow, let's evaluate these 6 dogs. And I told her, tell me about